Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Berurah share. It was just brought to my attention that yesterday's upload, for some reason, did not work, and that only the very beginning of the share actually was usable, and the rest of it was not. My apologies, I was not aware. So I'm going to be redoing yesterday's share, and as well as doing another share now. So this one will be a little bit longer. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey on Kuf Yod Aleph Amud Aleph. We're in Siman Taf Tzadik Ches. And we begin on the top of Kuf Yod Aleph Amud Aleph with Sif Yod Ches. Says the Mechaber, Koi. Some people pronounce this Kvi or Kevi. I think the proper pronunciation is Koi. What is a Koi? A Koi is a specific type of animal. The Ramah says Pirish. What's the Pirish of a Koi? Bria Shenolda Mitayesh Utzvi. This is the offspring of a male deer and a female goat. Let's take a look right away at the Mishnah Berurah in Eis Katan Tzadik Beis, Kai, Pirish. So first, Chavetz Chaim lets you know that in the words of the Gemara, when the Gemara uses the word Kai, there are two types of Kai. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'yesh oid min Kai. There's another animal that we call a Kai, Shehu Bria B'fnei Atzmai, which is a unique type of animal. It's not the offspring of two different species. It's its own distinct animal called a Kai. And we do not know how to properly categorize this kai. We don't know if the kai is a behema or it's a chaya. And therefore, we treat this type of kai, this unique bria, we treat it with the stringencies of both a behema and a chaya. What are those stringencies? The teunin kisoy kechaya. When you slaughter it, it needs kisoy adam. You're required to cover up the blood. You're required to do kisoy adam the way you would be with a chaya. A behema does not require kisoy adam, but a chaya does require kisoy adam. So we treat this kai with the stringency of a chaya, and we say that you're required to perform kisoy adam. However, v'chelban asur kibehema. But the chelev fats, the types of fats that would normally be asur by a behema that would be prohibited, in the case of a behema, we treat this kai with the stringency of a behema, and we say that it has an isser of chelev. So we're treating this kai with the stringencies of a chaya, and we're requiring you to perform kisei adam, and we're also treating it with the stringency of a behema, and we're saying that the chelev portions of the fats are usher the way they would be with a behema. Now, that's not the type of kai that we're discussing here in Sif Yod Ches. We're discussing the type of kai which is the offspring. It's bred from a goat and a deer. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah in Tzadik Gimel. The Mechaber said, the Ramah said that this kai comes mitayesh utzvi, from a goat and from a deer. Ritzayin Eloymar, what the Ramah wants to say is tzvi haba al hatiyasha. We're speaking here about a male deer that mates with a female goat. So the mother animal over here is a behema, it's a goat, and the father animal over here is a deer. Now, let's stop here in the Mishnah Berurah for a moment, and let's go back up to the Mechaber. So the Mechaber says, this koi, this animal, which is the offspring of a male deer and a female goat, you're not allowed to shech this animal on Yom Tov, and we're going to see momentarily why. And if you did go ahead and shecht this kai on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do kisei hadam. And this is true even if you happen to have dirt that has already been prepared for use for kisei adam. So the problem over here is not a muktzah problem. The reason you're not allowed to do shchita in kisei adam is not because of muktzah. There's a different reason here. What's the reason? Explains the Mechaber. Because if you're going to do kisei adam, remember, we're talking over here of the offspring of a male deer and a female goat. So the mother is a behema. The mother is a goat. The father is a deer. The father is a chaya. Now, we have a suffix what the status of this animal is. Normally, we would say we definitely go after the mother. Now, the mother is a behema, and therefore, you would think that this animal does not require kisei adam. However, we have a suffix. Maybe we also have to concern ourselves with the father of this animal. And the father of this animal was a deer. A deer is a chaya and does require kisei adam. So this kai, we have a suffix. Does it need kisei adam or does it not need kisei adam? Therefore, the Mechaber says you're not allowed to shecht it on Yom Tov, and b'diavad, if you did shecht it, you cannot do kisei adam, and you can't do kisei adam independent of the shiloh of muktzah. There's a different reason. What's the reason? Explains the Mechaber. Mipnei, because if you're going to do kisei adam on this animal, mipnei shaharoya yomar, the one who sees you doing kisei adam on this kai, he's going to say vadai chayahu. It must be that the halacha is that this animal, this offspring of the male deer and the female goat, it must be that la halacha we consider it vadai a chaya, and that's why you're doing kisei adam. Because if it would be a suffix whether or not you should do kisei adam, de'im loikein, if it's not a vadai chaya, if there's a suffix, lo hayu matrichen lechasais damai b'yom tov. We wouldn't allow you to do this tircha of doing kisei adam on Yom Tov. So the person who sees you doing kisei adam, he's going to reason, if we're allowing you to do kisei adam on Yom Tov, that must mean that the halacha of this kai is that it's a vadai achaya. Now, why is that a problem? Well, if the person is going to say, oh, a kai is vadai achaya, says the Mechaber, v'yavai lahatir chelbai. Oh, if he thinks that the halacha is that this is vadai achaya, well, then there's no isser of chelev on the fats of this animal. So now this person will come to make a mistake, and he will think that the chelev fats of this animal are mutter, and really we have to treat them as being asur because we have a suffix krisis over here. So in order to avoid this confusion, the halacha is you're not allowed to shecht this kai on Yom Tov, and if you do shecht it, you cannot do kisei adam. Okay, now let's go back into the Mishnah Berurah. We were in the middle of Ice Cut and Tzadik Beis. So Tzadik Gimel. So let's start again from the beginning of Tzadik Gimel. Mitaya Shutzvi. What the Mechaber wants to say is the kai over here that we're discussing is the offspring of tzvi, of a male deer habala tiyasha that mates with a female goat. Now, first the Chavetz Chaim says how he knows that. How do you know that the father has to be the deer and the mother has to be the goat? Di'ilu tayesh haba al hatzviya, because if we were talking about a male goat that mates with a female deer, well then, after gamkein chelbay asur, even though in that case the chelev would be asur out of a suffix, we would say, well, the father is a goat, the father is a behema, so we have a suffix whether or not we have to be concerned with the status of the father, and therefore we're going to asur the chelev on that offspring. However, in that case, when the mother was a tzviya, in that case, the halacha would be you're allowed to shecht it on Yom Tov. Why? Because in that case, the mother is a deer, and we definitely go by the mother. And since the mother is a deer, the mother is a chaya, bevadai, this animal needs kisei adam, and therefore you're allowed to go ahead and shecht it on Yom Tov. It is a chaya. It does need kisei adam, and the chelev is going to be asur. The chelev is asur in that case out of a suffix. Ice cut inside the dalet. Ein shech denaisai b'yom tov. You're not allowed to shecht this kai, this offspring of the male deer and the female goat. You're not allowed to shecht it on Yom Tov. Because the halacha is you're not going to be allowed to perform kisei adam until Motzei Yom Tov. Now, that's a problem, even though you're allowed to eat the meat even before the kisei adam. So there's no problem over here of manias simchas Yom Tov, which there's no problem of you not being able to eat the meat, but there's a different problem. Since you have to wait until Motzei Yom Tov to do the kisei adam, we have to be concerned. V'shema yispalea b'karka. It could be that between now and Motzei Yom Tov, the blood will become absorbed into the ground. V'lo yehe rishumai nicker, and it will be absorbed to the extent that you will not even be able to see a roishim, an impression of the dam anymore on the ground, in which case you can no longer perform kisei adam, V'yavatal mitzvahs kisui. So you won't be able to do kisei adam at all. And therefore, you're not allowed to shecht it on Yom Tov. You can't shecht the kai on Yom Tov because you can't perform kisei adam until Motzei Yom Tov. And by the time Motzei Yom Tov rolls around, it might be impossible for you to do kisei adam anymore. And the Mechaber said, this is true. If you did shecht it, b'di'evid, you're still not allowed to do kisei adam, even if you have ofar muchan. Even if you have dirt prepared for the kisei adam, so there's no problem of muktzah, you're still not allowed to do it. Even if you were making dirt expressly for the purpose of doing kisei adam on a koi. So there's no problem here of muktzah. You're still not allowed to do kisei adam for the reason that the Mechaber explained. Because we're afraid that if you do kisei adam, someone's going to see, oh, you're doing kisei adam on a koi on Yom Tov. That means that a koi is a vadai chaya, and if it's a vadai chaya, then there's no isser on the chaylev. Now we said all the way in the beginning of this sif in Tzadik Beis that we're talking here specifically about the type of koi which is the offspring of a male deer and a female goat. However, the Tzlach says that this halacha really applies to the other type of koi, the type of koi which is a unique, distinct type of animal on which we have a suffix: is it a behemoth or is it a chaya? But this kind of koi, which is the offspring of the male deer and the female goat, if you are making offer expressly for the purpose of kisei adam on this animal, it would be mutter to the shchita on Yom Tov ayin sham tamai. And he tells you, take a look in the tzlach, and you can see his rationale. But the tzlach is disagreeing with the way the Mishnah Berurah learned up this, or really with the Ramah. The Ramah is the one who says that the koi over here is the one that comes from a tayish and its feet. And the Mechaber explained what's the problem over here. Because we're afraid that the one who sees you shechting, doing kisei adam on this animal is going to wrongly conclude that a koi is a vadai chaya. Ritzonai loymar, says the Chavetz Chaim, what the Mechaber wants to say here is, we're afraid that a person is going to make a mistake and conclude that a koi is a vadai chaya. His raya is going to be, because he sees you doing kisei adam, and he reasons that the chachamim would not be allowing you to be tereach, to do a tircha on Yom Tov, to do kisei adam, if there's a suffix whether or not this is a behemoth or a chaya. So it must be that this is a vadai chaya, and that would create a problem, because then he would be matir the chaylev of this animal. V'yesh kayach biyad chachamim levatal mitzvah b'shev va'al taseh. What's happening over here now is the chachamim are telling you, do not do kisei adam, so you're being mevatel the mitzvah of kisei adam. Va'al taseh k'dei shelo yavel lidei mikshol b'savik karis b'kom va'aseh. So they're telling you over here that you cannot do kisei adam, even if you already shechted the animal. You cannot do kisei adam. So we're going to be mevatel the mitzvah of kisei adam on the chance that this is a chaya. You're being mevatel the mitzvah of kisei adam. How could the chachamim do that? And the answer is because by doing the kisei adam, you're going to generate a suffix that somebody might come to a mikshal on a karis. The isser of eating chaylev is krisus. So that's the chaylev of this animal is a suffix chiv krisus. So we want to protect somebody from coming to that suffix. So we're mevatel the mitzvah of kisei adam b'shev al taisa. We're telling you sit back and do nothing. So in a passive manner, you're being mevatel the mitzvah of kisei adam, so that you should not generate that somebody will go ahead and perform something which is a suffix chiyuv krisus bekum va'aseh. He'll go ahead and he'll eat the chaylev. That's a kum va'aseh, that's active. He will actively perform an act which is a suffix. It might be an isser of krisus. Eis tzadik zayin. The Mechaber said you can't do so you can't shech the animal on Yom Tov. No, we didn't do that Mechaber yet. Okay, let's go back to the Mechaber. Right by the Eis Tzadik Zayin for the Mishnah Berurah, by me it's 3 lines down. The Mechaber says, okay, so let's say b'di'evet you shechted this koi on Yom Tov, and now we said you're not allowed to do kisei adam. So what should you do? Villa Erev, and on Motzei Yom Tov, im Rishumai Nicker, if you could still recognize an impression where the dam fell on the ground, you could still recognize an impression in the ground, then yichasenu, then you'll do kisei adam. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tzadik Zayin, V'la Erev Rishumai, Ula Didan Da'isin Shnei Yomim. According to us, we have 2 days Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. Tzarich lahamtin b'kisei ad motzei Yom Tov Sheni. You would have to wait to do this kisei adam, not la'erev in the evening, like the Mechaber says, which sounds like you shechted it on Yom Tov day, and now you wait for the evening. But by us, where we have 2 days Yom Tov, if you shechted it on the first day Yom Tov, you're not going to do the kisei adam la'erev. You're not going to do it that evening. That would be the night going into the second day Yom Tov. You would have to wait till motzei Yom Tov Sheni. Says the Ramah, 4 lines down. Haga, v'dafka sheshechatoi b'keren zavis ukahai gavna. This halacha that we're saying that if you shechted the koi b'di'evet, you're not allowed to do kisei adam until motzei Yom Tov. That's talking about a case specifically where you did the shechita in a keren zavis. You did it in a corner. You did it off to the side somewhere. However, if you shechted the koi out in middle of the courtyard, afilu dam behema, then even if you were shechting a behema, an animal, a cow, a sheep, where there is absolutely no chiyuv of kisei adam, there's no suffix. We know right away by a behema there is no mitzvah of kisei adam. Says the Ramah, if you shechted an animal in middle of your chutzner, then even if you're talking about a behema where there's no requirement of kisei adam at all, the mitzvah of kisei adam does not apply, yachal lechasais, you're allowed to cover up the blood of the animal im yesh lo afer muchan, if there's no potential problem of muktzah, because you have earth already prepared for usage, so there's no muktzah issue. Why are you allowed to do this? Why are you allowed to be tareach? Why are you allowed to go cover up the dam? There's no requirement of kisei adam, so why are you allowed to perform this tircha on Yom Tov? Explains the Ramah, tahavalei kigraf sharei, because this is like a chamber pot of excrement, which is something that you're allowed to dispose of. You're allowed to cover it up on Yom Tov, even though really the excrement is muktzah, it has no use, because you're not mechuyev to have something mius sitting in the middle of your courtyard, and you might walk over there and you might get your suit dirty. V'tzarich lechasais, you must cover up the dam, shelo yislach lechu kelev b'chatzah, so that when people walk in the chatzah, they won't get their suits dirty. So the Ramah is pointing out this whole halacha where we're being done on the kisei adam of a koi, whether or not you're allowed to do it if you already shechted the animal, realize that that's talking over here if you shechted off to the side somewhere. So there's no other reason why you have to cover the blood. The only reason you have to cover the blood is because of the mitzvah of kisei adam. So then, when we're talking about a koi, you can't do kisei adam, because someone is going to look and he's going to say, why is he doing kisei adam? He's not doing kisei adam so his suit shouldn't get dirty. It's all the way on the side. Nobody walks there. So why is he doing kisei adam? It must be because a koi is a vadai chaya. Oh, if a koi is a vadai chaya, then it's chayil of his mutter. That's when we have this issue. But if we're talking about you shechted a behema, you shechted a sheep, you shechted a goat, you shechted a cow, then we don't have this whole issue, because there's a whole other reason why you have to do kisei adam. You have to do kisei adam shelo yislach lechu kelev, so that people shouldn't get dirty. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tzadik Ches, afilu dam behema. Even if we're talking about the blood of an animal, where there's no mitzvah of kisei adam at all. Umashma the kolshkein dam koi demuto lechasais. And kolshkein, certainly, if you shechted a koi in middle of the courtyard, then certainly you're allowed to cover up the dam. Because not only is there a reason to cover up the dam, shelo yislach lechu kelev, so your suit shouldn't get dirty, there's also a mitzvah, a potential mitzvah, at least a suffix mitzvah of kisei adam. So you're allowed to cover up the blood. Someone's going to say, oh, he's covering up the blood of a koi. It must be a koi as a vadai chaya. No, he's going to say he's covering up the blood because he did a shechita in the middle of the chutzner, and you can't have a pool of blood in the middle of the chutzner. So this whole problem is only negeya if you shechted a koi off to the side. If you shechted a koi off to the side, someone's going to say, if he's doing kisei adam, it must be because it's a vadai chaya and there's a mitzvah of kisei adam, because there's no other reason to cover up the blood. but in the middle of the courtyard there is. So mashma, the implication of the Ramah is the cholshkein dam koydem otolachasos. Certainly, if you shechted a koy in the middle of the chotzer, it's permissible to do kisei adam. Kevin the belav mitzvahs kisei, because forget the mitzvah of kisei adam. Tzarachu lechasos mishom mius. You need to cover up the blood because you can't have a pool of blood in the middle of the chotzer. V'shuv lo yitu lahater chelboy. So no one's going to make a mistake and conclude that the koi must be a vadai chaya and therefore its kelev is mutter. The Yomi, instead, they're going to say mechasahu b'shvil shelo yislach lechu kelev. He's covering up the dam so his suit shouldn't get dirty. So he shouldn't have a pool of blood laying in the middle of the chotzer. Vayin Magen Avram, however, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Magen Avram and Sivkat Lamed Hey. Shemet Tzaded, who sides with the opinion, Dein Lahakel Pazeh Lechasois Rak Hecha Shemechaven Be'emes B'Shvil Shelo Yislach Lechu Kelev. The Magen Avram says you should only do this kisui if you're really doing it because you want to cover up this pool of blood so your suit shouldn't get dirty. But if you're really doing it for the mitzvah of kisei adam, you're not allowed to do it. V'ayin bir halacha. And Ois Katan Sadi Tes, the Ramah said, this kisei adam, this cover, I'm not going to call it kisei adam, the covering up of the blood that you're allowed to do, even by a behema, where there's no mitzvah of kisei adam. If you shechted an animal in the middle of the courtyard, that of course is only if you have a farmuchan, if you have earth that was prepared for this, so it's not muktzah. Ois Katan Sadi Tes, im yeshlei offer muchan, kigain. For example, shehiknis beloy kupasei offer bistam kibesif yod zayin. For example, before Yom Tov, you brought a box of dirt into the house for general purpose usage, like we explained a couple of days ago. Sometimes they would bring earth in before Yom Tov because earth had a lot of different uses in the home. So if you brought in a box of earth on Erev Yom Tov, that was prepared for any usage of dirt. So now you have Offer Mumchan, you could use it to cover up a puddle of blood in the Chatzah. Or let's say you didn't bring it in with the intent for general usage. You brought it in specifically to cover up excrement in case a child has an accident. If it's muchan for that, it's also muchan for this. That means it's muchan to cover up dirty things. When you have a graf shalrei, when you have excrement, cover it up. So too over here, you have a puddle of blood, you're allowed to cover it up. Okay, let's go to the Mechaber Sif Yud Tes. Says the Mechaber, Shachat behema v'chayav v'nisarev dama. Let's say you shechted a behema, like a sheep or a cow, and you also shechted a chaya, you also shechted a deer. So for the deer, you have a chiyuv of kisei adam. For the cow, you have no chiyuv of kisei adam. But now the bloods got mixed up. So now I don't know if I have this blood that I'm covering up. Is it tam behema? Is it tam chaya? V'yeshloi offer muchan, and you have earth prepared for usage. So there's no muktzah problem here. Oy efer kira, or you have ashes in the oven that are not muktzah, that are available to you to use for kisei adam. Do you do kisei adam over here or not? You have a mixture of blood that is chayiv in kisei adam and blood that's not chayiv in kisei adam. And it's Yom Tov. Should you do the kisei or not? Says the Mechaber, Im yachal lechasoisoi b'dekira achas, if you're able to do the kisei adam with one little shovelful of earth, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to say that this is lav dafke. It doesn't mean one shovelful. What it means is, if you're able to accomplish the kisei adam by using the amount of earth that you would have used anyway to do the kisei adam on the dam of the behema, we know that you have dam of a behema over here. You know you shechted a cow, so you know that there's dam. I'm sorry, backwards. You know that there's dam of a chaya here. You know that there's dam of a deer here that's chayiv in kisei adam. So you know you have to do kisei adam. Now the problem is that you also have dam of a cow. And the dam of the cow is not chayiv in kisei adam. Therefore, says the Mechaber, if you're able to accomplish the kisei on all of the blood by using the amount of effort that you were required to do anyway on behalf of the dam of the chaya that you know is there, im yachal lechasoisei b'dekira achas she'enoi tzarich laharbois b'shvil dam habehema. if you're able to do this without exerting any extra effort on behalf of the fact that there is behema dam here, so you're not expending anyway you had to do kisei adam because you have dam of the chaya, right? And you're going to expend any additional effort on behalf of the fact that there is also dam behema here, then you should do kisei adam. But if you can't do that, if you're going to have to expend more effort because of the dam of the behema, then you can't do kisei adam, because then you're exerting effort that's not l'tzarech yomtiv. You don't really need it. It's for nothing. The dam of the behema doesn't need kisei adam. Let's see the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah is cut in Kuf Aleph back in Kuf Yud Aleph from an Aleph. Shachat behema v'chaya. You shechted a behema and a chaya. So you shechted, let's say, a sheep and a deer. V'hu adin koi v'chaya. Or maybe it was a koi. It was this suffix animal and a chaya. V'nesarev damam. And their bloods became mixed together. V'haya dama chaya merubim. And there was still enough dam of the chaya ad kidei she'im haya dam behema mayim. So that if the dam behema that got mixed together with the dam of the chaya would be water, you still would see the redness of the dam of the chaya. So again, you shechted a deer and you shechted a behema, and the blood got mixed together. Well, how much blood got mixed together? How much blood was there from the chaya? If it was one drop of blood from the chaya and it was a gallon of blood from the cow, then maybe you don't have a chiyuv of kisei adam here at all, because the dam of the chaya, if it was one drop of dam from the chaya, it's bottled in the blood of the behema. How much dam do you need to be mevatel the dam of the chaya? So take a look at the gallon of dam of the behema. If there's so much dam of the behema that if that wouldn't be dam, if it would be water, and you would take the dam that you have from the chaya, that drop of dam, and you would drop it in, would you see the redness of the dam, or is there so much water that the redness of the dam is not nicker, is not recognizable in the water? In that case, then the dam of the chaya is bottled in the dam of the behema, and then there's no requirement of kisei at all. We're talking over here where there is a requirement of kisei. So there's enough dam of the chaya that it's not bottled in the dam of the behema. So the Mechaber said, it's cut in Kuf Gimel, the Mechaber said, if you could do this kisei, b'dekira achas, which means with like one shovelful, explains the Mishnah, Berurah lav dafka. This language is not really precise. It doesn't mean one shovelful. V'akavana, the intent of the Mechaber is, she'ein tzarech laharbois b'tiltol ofar, you're not going to have to bring more dirt b'shvil demei habehema sheni toisvu, because there's blood of the behema, which is not chayiv in kisei adam. No, you're not. You have so little. There's so little dam over here. The same amount of dirt that you would have used anyway for the kisui, for the dam of the chaya, you're going to be able to do the kisui on the dam of the chaya and the dam of the behema with that same amount of dirt, and therefore with the same amount of effort. Then you should do kisei adam. For who adin imahoyoloi decker notes b'ma'yoyim ba'afar tichuach nam yishari b'dekira achas. It doesn't only be the Mechaber's words were that you have afar muchan. Doesn't have to be that you have afar muchan. It could also be that you have a crowbar stuck into loose dirt. But you could also do it if you don't have to expend any extra effort. The haloi tarach tvei b'shvil behema. The point is that you're not doing any extra tircha because of the dam of the behema. And furthermore, the Mishnah Berurah says, according to what we said earlier in Sif Tezvav, if you shechted an animal on Yom Tov, and you don't have earth prepared for kisei adam, you're allowed to do kisei adam with ash, with efer kira, even if it's not mukhan, because the efer kira is always considered mukhan. Who hadin b'inyanenu nami dina hachi. So too over here in the context of this halacha, if you have efer kira, also if you could do the kisei adam on the mixture of the dam of the chaya and the dam of the behema, and you're not going to have to expend any additional effort, go ahead and do it. The mutter, as long as you're not expending any additional effort by virtue of the fact that there's dam of a behema here. The only reason the Bechaber mentions specifically the case of having ofar muchan, elamishum seifa, the imenu yachal chasoisay, but the kira achas, I feel about ofar muchan lo yichasenu. If you can't do it with that amount of effort, if you're going to have to expend extra effort, then you're not allowed to do it. Then you cannot do kisei adam. Why? The tarach b'shvil behema, because you're expending effort on Yom Tov in order to do kisei adam on the dam of behema. But the dam of behema is not chayiv in kisei adam. The Chavetz Chaim says that the Achrayim all conclude and they all concur that this is, they disagree with this halacha, and they say that you cannot do this kisoi even if you could accomplish it with the same amount of effort that you need just for the dam of the chaya. The kevan the ma'uriv b'dam behema, because these opinions, they reason like this. You have a mixture here of dam behema and dam chaya. Now, you're not mechuyev to cover all the dam. You're mechuyev to cover part of the dam. Now, how do you know the part of the dam that you cover, maybe the area that you're going to cover is only dam behema, which is not chayiv kisei dam at all? The kevan the ma'uriv b'dam behema, since there is dam behema mixed in here, in Cain, if so, after it's possible the makom shemachasa that in the place where you do the kisei adam, dam behema merubim kalkach, there's so much dam behema over there. Ad kadesh dam chaya lo haya nikar im dam behema hayamayim. There's such a negligible amount of dam chaya over there where you accomplished the kisui that there's no chiyuv of kisui, because it's an amount of dam chaya that's bottled in the amount of dam behema. Upater is a makom alachasais. So you were tareach, you expended effort to do kisei adam on an area with his dam, where there's no chiyuv of kisei at all, and therefore we can't be makar this in Yom Tov. V'im kein tarach b'shvil dam behema she'enei chai b'kisei v'aseh. The Kosva Achrayim Yachrayim right, if you did this shechita in the middle of the chotzer, you're allowed to do kisei, you're allowed to cover up that dam with prepared afar, even if you need a lot of effort. Now we go to Sif Chaf and the end of Siman Tav Tzadukes. Says the Mechaber. Shachat Sipar me Erev Yom Tov v'loy kisa damai. Let's say you shechted a bird on Erev Yom Tov and you did not perform kisei adam. Lo yichasenu b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do that kisei adam on Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah kan kovav shachat Sipar lo yichasenu v'afilu yesh lo afar muchan nami lo yishar leila mitrach. This is true even if you have afar muchan, even if you have dirt that's prepared. So there's no question of muktzah. If you shechted on Erev Yom Tov, and now you want to do the kisei adam on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to. Kevin dahi efshar lemi Erev Yom Tov. This was efshar on Erev Yom Tov. This is a tircha that you could have done on Erev Yom Tov, so then you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Umimna misivchas Yom Tov lakakan. Now there's no reason over here to be matir this because of a tzarich of simchas Yom Tov. Da'afilu lo nechas alei shari abasar ba'achila. Because even if you don't perform kisei adam, the meat of the bird that you shechted is still mutar on Yom Tov. V'yamten ad la'erev, so you'll wait until Matzah Yom Tov. V'yeh rishuma nikar yichasenu, and if the impression of the dirt is still of the blood is still recognizable on the ground, then you'll do kisei adam. V'yesh lichpais alav kli l'shamroi kadesh yichasenu, and says the Chavetz Chaim, in a case like this, we are not going to be able to do kisei adam until Matzah Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, you should cover up the dam with an upside-down keli in order to protect it, so that you will be able to be mekayim the mitzvah on Matzah Yom Tov. We don't want something to happen to that dam. It might get stepped on and pushed into the ground, and now it's not rishuma nikar. We want you to protect it so that you should be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of kisei adam on Matzah Yom Tov. Okay, now let's head into Siman Tav Tzadik Tes. Din maliga umalicha b'Yom Tov. The halachas that pertain to maliga. Maliga is a specific type of flaying or skinning. the hides off the animal, umalicha, and the halachas of salting the flesh of the animal, b'yomtiv, on yomtiv, ubay, hey, seifim, and over here we have 5 seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, ein margilin b'yomtiv. You're not allowed to strip the hide off the animal using the method that the Chazal in Masechtas Bechoros call margilin, which is a reference to regel, to the foot. I might as well tell you now what this really refers to is this was a method of skinning the hide off the animal where somehow you would bring all of the hide down to one leg and then strip it off that leg so that you take the entire hide off the animal in one piece without cutting it. How was this done? Chavetz Chaim gives some explanation of it. I don't understand it, so I don't know precisely how this was done, but that's the gist of it. The gist of it is you want to get the entire hide off in one piece without making cuts all over. So somehow it was brought all down to one leg of the animal and then stripped off at that point, and you got the whole hide in one piece. Ein margilin b'yomtiv. That's the word margilin. The shirish is regel, the leg, the foot. Ein margilin b'yomtiv. You're not allowed to use this method of stripping the hide on yomtiv. Ketzad hu margil. How was this done? This margil. Zeh hamoitzi kol habasar meregel echad. Literally, this means stripping all of the flesh off of one leg, so that you could pull off all of the hide at that point, shalem, in one piece, without tearing it. Why can't you do this in Yom Tov? This was not an easy thing to do. So this was a method of flaying the animal that involved a lot of tircha. And that's not a tircha, that's tzarech hamayid. You're not doing it for the mayid, you're doing it because you want to preserve the hide in one piece. So to do a tircha gedola like this, that's not tzarech hamayid, you're not allowed to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Aleph, the implication of the language of the Mechaber is if you pulled off the hide from 2 of the animal's rear legs, so you didn't bring all the hide down to one leg, somehow you did it by venue of the back 2 legs, tahainu, and this means somehow you would make a cut in the hide from one rear leg of the animal to the other one, bein shnei raglayim, between the 2 legs, bein shnei raglayim ha'achreinim, between the 2 rear legs, val yedei zeh, and by doing this method, mafshit ha'or shalem, you could strip off the hide in one complete piece with one cut in it that's between the back 2 legs, deshari, that would be mutter. Delav tircha rabihi kol kach, because that's not the same great amount of tircha as when you try to strip off the hide from one leg. The yesh machmir b'chal gavni, however, there are those that are machmir in all cases, shaloi lahavshit ha'or shalem, that you're not allowed to employ any method on Yom Tov that allows you to bring off the hide in one piece. Because no matter which method you use to accomplish that, it's always going to be a tircha yisera, an extra level of tircha, which is not necessary for Yom Tov purposes, and therefore it's also on Yom Tov. Sif Beis in the Mechaber. Also, limloig gedi, you're not allowed to boil up a young goat, a young kid, with its skin, with its hide, unless this is being done so that you should be able to eat the hide of the kid. Apparently the hide of a kid, the hide of a young goat, is soft enough that if you cook it up, it becomes edible, and you could eat it. You eat the skin of a chicken. So this young gedi, this gedi also, it's possible to boil up the animal so that you should be able to eat the hide. You're not allowed to do it. So you're not allowed to do this maliga unless you're doing it so that you should be able to eat the hide on Yom Tov. Then you're allowed to do it because then it's a tircha, but it's l'tzarech hamayit. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah is cut and base. Limloi gedi. What does this mean to be moilig the gedi? Tahainu litnoi beroischin la'achar hamalicha. This is where they would put the gedi into boiling water right after the malicha, the salting process was done. And why was this done? Kidei lahavir haseir, to remove the hair off of the hide of the goat. You're not allowed to do this. You're only allowed to doing it if the purpose of doing it is to render the hide edible, and you want to eat the hide. Since the hide of a young kid is soft, there are those that eat it together with the meat, together with the flesh of the gedi. In that case, that boiling up of the gedi, that would be tzarich echel nefesh. That's cooking for echel nefesh purposes. Like we're going to see later on, that when you do shechita to an animal, you're allowed to boil up the head and the feet, because that's tzarich echel nefesh. However, the Chavetz Chaim says many poskim disagree with this halacha. And they do not allow boiling up of the animal, rak harosh v'haraglayim, only in the case of the head and the feet. The nehiki b'kach, where the minig is to do that. That was always the minig. They boiled up the head and they boiled up the feet, and it was done with tzarich echel nefesh. Aval maligas kol haguf, but to drop an entire kid into a kettle of boiling water, that's einay elo lemefunakim b'yoser. That's not a davar hashava l'chol nefesh. That's not something that everybody does. That's big mifunakim, big picky eaters. They go ahead and they do this boiling of the entire gedi together with its hide. That's not something that's just, it's not travel l'chol nefesh. So you're not allowed to do it. So it looks much more like, why are you boiling up this kid? It must be the beginning of the tanning process of the hide. So you're not allowed to do it. It's not tzarich echel nefesh. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, v'nachar lahachmer lechatchila, you should be machmer. Kasra apaiskim de ba'oif de leishayach hefshit. When it comes to a fowl like a chicken, where there is no hefshit, we don't skin. That's not a normal process. Part of the process of preparing the animal for eating is not skinning the chicken. We generally leave the skin on the chicken. Then certainly you're allowed to boil the whole chicken to get the feathers off and everything else, or to scorch it with a fire, which also gets the feathers off, kalaguf. You're allowed to do that in that case, because then it's perfectly normal to go ahead and eat the skin together with the animal, and these are all steps that you must take in order to eat the skin. Siv Gimel. If you shechted an animal on Yom Tov, mutar lahagbia oira, you're allowed to lift up and handle the hide, and to put the hide in an area where it will get walked on by people, even if there's no meat left on the hide at all. You strip the hide off the animal, and there's no meat here. So the hide should be muktzah. You don't have a use for the hide on Yom Tov. You have a use for the meat on Yom Tov. The hide, and especially it's an untanned hide, the hide should be muktzah. Yet, says the Mechaber, no, you're allowed to pick up the hide. You're allowed to move it if you have to move it. We'll see in the Mishnah Berurah cases of why you may have to move the hide. You're also allowed to take the hide and put it down on the street where people will walk on it, even though that begins the tanning process. You're still allowed to do that on Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah on Eis Katan Daled, like Bia Oira. You're allowed to lift up the hide, says the Chavetz Chaim. What the Mechaber wants to say here is, L'taltala, you're allowed to handle the hide, to place it in a protected area. You don't want somebody to walk off with your hide. So you shechted, you flayed the animal. You must flay the animal l'tarich echel nefesh. You can't eat the meat unless you take the skin off. But now that the hide is off, it should be muktzah. Yet, you're allowed to pick up the hide to put it into a makom mishomer, to put it into a protected area so that nobody should walk off with your hide. Or, alternatively, you're allowed to move it mechama l'tzel, from a sunny area to a shadowy area, so that it shouldn't get ruined. Even though normally raw hides that were moist, they were just stripped off the animal, so they were not yet tanned, they weren't processed yet. Even though normally we say such hides are muktzah, Also, in this case on Yom Tov, Hekelu, the Chachamim were lenient, and they said that you're allowed to move the hide if you have to. Why? Because if we do not allow you to handle the hide after the shechita, lo yishchait, you're not going to check the animals on Yom Tov, and you'll have pizza for the Yom Tov Suda instead of having fleishiks. Because you're going to say, what? I'm going to go check the animal and then I'm going to lose $1,000 because I can't handle the hide and the hide is muktzah? Therefore, the Chachamim they relaxed their Isser of Muktzah. Remember, the Isser of Muktzah is only Isser D'Rabbanan, so they relaxed the Isser of Muktzah, and they said you're allowed to handle the hide to protect it so that you shouldn't refrain from shechting animals on Yom Tov. Ice cut and hay, you're allowed to lift it up. V'litna b'makayim, you're allowed to put it in a ice cut and hay. Yeah, you could put it into a place where people will walk on it. What the Mechaber wants to say here is the chain, and similarly, Hekelu, they ruled leniently, Shamuta litna b'makam drisas haragayim, so that you could put the hide into an area where people will walk on it. Shal yedeh drisa mesabida arktzas, because that begins the tanning process. You see, what the Chavetz Chaim is pointing out to us over here is that the Mechaber just told you two things. If you look back in the Mechaber, at the beginning of Sif Gimel, he says, Mutter lahagbiya oira, you're allowed to lift up the hide. That's one leniency. That is, you're allowed to lift up the hide to put it into a makom mishumer, to put it in a protected area, or to take it out of the sun and put it in the shade so it shouldn't get ruined. That's one thing. Mutter lahagbiya oira. Now there's a second leniency. V'litna b'makam drisas haraglayim. You're also allowed to pick it up and put it into the Rishus Harabim where people will walk on it, which will begin the tanning process. Why is that mutter? So let's go back into the Mishnah Berurah ice cotton hay right by the ice cotton ches for the Sharat Tzion. The kaven delay muchacha milsa lehedya she'aisa mishum kain. Since by lifting up the hide and putting it into the Rishus Harabim where people walk, it's not dead obvious that you're doing this in order to tan the leather. The Esher Shtacha Kadeshi Yeshua, maybe you put it out there so that people can sit on it. That's the way people sat down in those days. They would spread out a hide, or they would throw some cushions down on the ground, and they would sit on it. So if somebody sees you spreading out a hide out in the street on Yom Tov, he's not going to say right away, oh, look at that, he's tanning leather on Yom Tov. No, he's saying, oh, look, he's putting down a mat outside so he could sit down. So since it's not muchacha milsa that you do it for tanning, this is considered something being done in an unusual manner. And the Chazal didn't want to answer this on a person. Why? Again, the imkain, because if we're going to tell you that you can't spread out the hide in the street on Yom Tov, mimna, you're going to refrain, and you won't check that animal for Yom Tov. Mishon hefsed ar, because you're going to figure, if I shecht an animal for Yom Tov, I'm going to lose the hide. So we don't want that to happen. We want you to be able to have a fleishik asuda. Vasilim nuemis terchas Yom Tov. Umiu dafka litna b'makom hadarsim. You're only allowed to do this. You're only allowed to spread out the hide in an area where people will walk on it. But if you want to put pegs in the ground, and now you want to lay out this hide on top of pegs, Kadeshius Yavesh, so that it should dry out in the sun, also that's forbidden, because in that case, anybody who sees what you're doing is going to know that you're doing this to start the tanning process. Why are you hanging out a hide on Yom Tov? You're doing it because you want it to dry out. That's part of the tanning process. And if we're going to allow you to spread out a hide for its benefits so that it should dry up, you'll also come to salt it, which is a problem. Now, Mechaber said, you're allowed to spread out this hide. He said that on the top line of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Even if there's absolutely no meat on this hide, you're still allowed to go ahead, pick it up, put it in the shade. You're allowed to pick it up and put it in a makom mishumer. You're allowed to put it out in the street where people will walk on it, even if there's no basar klal. What's his point? What's the Mechaber's point? Even if there's no meat at all, explains the Chavetz Chaim, it's cut vav, the Yeshaleh Kazayas Basar, because if there would still be a Kazayas of meat left over on the hide, then anyway it would be mutter to handle the hide because it's not muktzah, it has meat on it. And the meat has a tzarech yontiv, that's tzarech nefesh. So the meat's not muktzah, so the hide is not muktzah. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We're on the top line of Kuf Yud Beis, Amud Aleph. No, Rabbi say, if Mashiach still doesn't come by tonight, so we have another Tisha B'Av. We have to go through another Tisha B'Av mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. We should remember what it is that we're mourning for. Those of us who haven't learned much of Kachim, maybe we don't have a connection to what the Beis Hamikdash is, but it's not just the Beis Hamikdash that we're mourning for. We're mourning for a whole way of life. We're mourning for a way of life that would truly allow us to live al pi Torah, to live in Eretz Yisrael with a Sanhedrin and the Lishkas HaGazis, with a Bezdin of 23 in every city, with all the halachas of Tumah and Tahara, with all of the mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz, with giving trumas and meisers to Kahanim and Leviim, to having a system of Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani, a whole way of life described in the Torah that we don't have. It's not only a Beis Hamikdash that we don't have. There's so much of Torah life that we don't have. That's what we're mourning for, Rabbi Say, and that's what we're spal to the Rebbeinu Shalom. We should finally bring the Bias Geld Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. We should have no more Kinnis, no more Eicha, no more Tisha B'Av. They should all become something of the past. And we should be Zeichet to be in Eretz Yisrael. Be well.